I'm K Singh. I'm a freelance consultant and worked much on the Panchayati Raj system in India. Thank you very much. I'm going to discuss with you this morning the provisions which has come under the Parliament Act of 40 passed by the Parliament in 1996, emanating out of the 73rd Amendment to the Constitution to provide local self-government in the tribal areas. The tribal areas in India, they are covered under the Constitution framework, and Article 244(1) of the Constitution provides for 5th schedule areas, and Article 244(b) is provided for the 6th schedule of the country. Now, this part of the ninth part of the Constitution is now extended in a modified version in the 5th schedule areas, that is Article 244(1) of the Constitution. Now, 9th schedule, as you know, that has been amended under 73rd Constitution Amendment, and this particular Act of the Parliament was passed in 1996. Now, this provides a self-rule for the tribal population who are living in the 5th schedule areas, a sort of village governance with grassroots participatory democracy, and suitable administrative framework with traditional management practices in the 5th schedule area. This also provides a very highlighting and focusing issue of safeguarding and preserving traditions and customs of the tribals. So, these are the basic rationale for this act to be passed by the Parliament. Now, there are certain provisions which are mandatory in nature, which you may not find that it comes in the 73rd Constitution Amendment. Now, these amendments, mandatory provisions are any legislation on panchayat for tribal areas shall be in consonance with the customary law, social and religious practices, and traditional management practices of community resources. Second is that village is defined as a habitation or a group of habitation or hamlet or a group of hamlets of the community managing own affairs according to traditions and customs. Now, this is very important because you will find that the village has not been properly defined in the 73rd Constitution Amendment, but here in this act the village has been defined. Now, there is another important provision which has been given in the this act is the establishment of Gram Sabha. Now, if you look at the 73rd Amendment, you will not find that there is a provision to have the establishment of the Gram Sabha in the for the panchayats. Now, another mandatory provision is reservation of seats in every tier for scheduled tribes not less than half of the total number of seats. Therefore, there is a complete reservation of the tribals at each tier, that is the 3 tiers of the panchayat system or the local government system in the 5th schedule areas, where the half of the reservation has been done. Now, reservation for other communities which has been given under the part 9 of the Constitution in proportion to the population of that particular community has also been extended in this area. Now, another important provision which is mandatory in nature is that the chairpersons on every panchayat is reserved for the scheduled tribes. Now, each tier, that is all the 3 tiers of the panchayats, they will have the chairperson who is a tribe. So, that is also reserved for the tribal people. Now, there are other provisions providing that the state government may nominate unrepresented tribes not exceeding 1/10 of the total elected members at intermediate and district level panchayat. Also, to ensure that higher level of the panchayat do not assume powers and authority of the local government at the lower level or particularly the Gram Sabha. That means that any higher level or higher tier of the panchayat should not assume the powers and authority of the lower tier of the panchayat. That is a provision given in this act. That is a very remarkable provision in this. Another provision which has been given, that the patterns of the 6th schedule, which maintains while designing the administrative arrangement for the district panchayat. That means that whatever the arrangement is being made in the 6th schedule areas, that can be taken into consideration while framing or while designing the administrative framework of at the district level. Now, these are the provisions given in that. Besides, there are certain provisions which are very important and mandatory in nature, that the panchayats now this power has been given to the legislature to decide whether these powers should be given at the panchayat level, any tier of the panchayat, or at the Gram Sabha level. Now, here there is a discretionary power given to the state legislature to decide. Now, for example, the enforcement of prohibition, that means any toxicant which is sold in that particular area, who is going to take decision to prohibit it depends upon the state legislature, whether it should be given to the Zilla Parishad or intermediate panchayat or at the Gram Sabha level. Similarly, the planning and management of minor water bodies has to be decided by the state legislature, where to be given this power. The control over the institutions and functionaries of the social sector, that is to be decided by the state legislature. Control over money lending, this is very important because the tribals are suffering because of the money lending. Now, therefore, this has to be prohibited, or whether to grant the license for them or not, that has to be decided by the state legislature, that which tier will have this type of power. Similarly, the managing the village markets also has to be decided, but this is a mandatory provision. Prevent alienation of land, this is also a very important provision, and this is mandatory in nature, that the tribals do suffer from alienation of land, and therefore, this power is to be given either at any level of the panchayat. Control over local plans and resources, particularly the tribal sub-plans, has to be done by the panchayats only. This is a mandatory provision. Now, ownership of MFP, that is minor forest produce. Now, tribals, their livelihood depends upon the minor forest produce, and who is going to, and they are the owners of this minor forest produce, and therefore, it has to be decided that whether the Gram Sabha or any other 3 tiers of the panchayat should have this power. Now, these are the mandatory powers given, but then there is a caveat in that it has to be decided by the state legislature that which tier has to do this. Now, Gram Sabha has been given some specific power which is also not available in the 73rd amendment. This is very remarkable and historical. It says that the safeguard and preserve traditions, customs and cultural identity of the tribals, that has to be done at the Gram Sabha level. The community resources are to be given to the Gram Sabha to decide about it. Then, customary mode of dispute resolution, because there is no need that one should go to the court of law, because it is a very difficult, for the tribals to go to the court of law. It is very expensive, and then the courts may not be available at the local level. Therefore, it has to be decided at the local level, at the Gram Sabha level. So, therefore, it is a mandatory that the customary mode of dispute resolution should be done by the Gram Sabha. Approval of plans and projects for social and economic development has to be approved by the Gram Sabha. Then, identification and selection of beneficiaries. Now, this is a very important provision given, and this power has been ordained to the Gram Sabha to select the beneficiaries for any socio-economic development programs which comes from the government. That should be decided by the Gram Sabha. The very purpose of this is that in the village and the Gram Sabha, people know each other, that who is the real beneficiary and eligible for this particular program, and therefore, this has been given to the Gram Sabha only. And the another important provision is the panchayats has to obtain a utilization certificate from the Gram Sabha. Now, whatever the funds for the development which comes to the Gram Panchayat, that has to be certified after the expenditure and utilization by the Gram Sabha. That means there will be a system of transparency, there will be a system of social audit of the functioning of the Gram Panchayat, as also the utilization of funds, whether it is being misutilized or properly utilized. Now, these are the important provisions which you do not find in the 73rd Amendment, but this is very much applicable in the 5th schedule areas under this new dispensation and the new framework for the local government system. Now, there are apart from this, what we find that there are areas of concern, that although there is a very good provisions have been given in this act, and the act provides a self rule for the tribals, but even then there are certain areas which are for concern, and these are the gray areas that has to be considered. Now, the question comes that this covers only the 5th schedule areas, and the 6th schedule areas, that is also covered under the constitutional provision as I have mentioned earlier. But there are certain tribes living in this country who are neither covered under the 5th nor under the 6th schedule, and therefore these provisions are not extended to them. There are certain tribes which are left out, they are neither covered under the 5th schedule nor under the 6th schedule, and therefore the provisions which I have already mentioned to you are not applicable to them. Now, for example, the tribals are there in Kerala, tribals are there in Karnataka, but they are not being covered under these rules. Therefore, there is a matter of concern, and it has to be considered by the government what to do, what not to do. Now, there is a not properly given that what is the expected role of the panchayats. So far, the linkage with the tribal advisory council is there. Under the provisions of the 5th schedule, there is a provision to have a tribal advisory council, and they give lot of funds to the for the development in that area, but no linkage has been established. Now, so far the customary laws, social and religious practices are concerned, it is at variance for each tribes. Now, this has not been properly codified in the country till now, and therefore it cannot be documented. Hence, the assimilation of one legislation is a very difficult proposition. Now, defining village as a habitation of a community hamlet is very difficult. It is not a very practical proposition, because a community will have only few numbers of the people, and if you are going to declare this as a village, then it will be difficult to have a framework in that particular village. Another important gray area we found that reservation has been given to the tribes for the chairperson as a permanent, it cannot be changed, as also for the other persons who are narrated or in the part 9 of the constitution. Now, what happens that there is a judgment by the court of law that the reservation has to go on rotation, and therefore making a permanent reservation to a particular community or a particular tribe or a particular community cannot be done. It will create some judicial and legal problem while doing so. Moreover, there are certain districts where the population of the tribals will be less than the other community, and suppose that a tribal chairs that particular district because of this provision, then he will face lot of problem of passing any resolution, because majority is not in his hands, and therefore this has to be taken. And it is actually in contrary to the judicial verdict of rotation system. District not having a tribal population majority may face resentment from other dominant communities which are available in that area. Arrangement of the 6th schedule at the district level may create functional problem, because in 6th schedule they have been given the power of judiciary, they have been given power of legislation. Now, suppose if it is given here, it will create problem, because within the state itself a district will have the legislative power, whereas other districts may not have, where the panchayats are there, and therefore there will be a mismatch in the administration and the working and functioning of the panchayat system. Now, extended act has ramifications on various existing laws relating to tribal governance. For example, needs to amend various law relating to money lending, because there is a money lending rule is there, act is there. That part has to be amended so far the tribal areas are concerned, on the basis of or according to the provisions given in this act. Similarly, the forest land, there is a forest act is there, that has to be amended. The Natural Resources Act also has to be amended. So therefore, these things are to be taken care by the state. So for the acquisition of land, there is a provision under the 5th schedule under section 4 of the P.E.S.A. Then social audit, then prohibition, then ownership of minor forest produce, then land alienation, regulation of money lending, control of functionaries. All these things, the rules and the acts which are already in existence or in vogue in each state, has to be amended. Now what are happening that this all has to be compiled and put into a single jacket of documents, so that it will be good for the tribals to act accordingly. Till now there are only 4 or 5 states they have framed rule as per the provisions of this act. Now these states are Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra and Himachal Pradesh. Other 6 states where this 5th schedule is covered, like AP, Telangana, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, MP, Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Odisha, they all have to frame the rules according to the provisions of the 5th schedule. Now the another important thing is that the spirit of this act is in the principles of participatory democracy as a basic unit of governance, that is the Gram Sabha. But the act has not empowered the Gram Sabha properly, rather it has to be distributed among all the 3 tiers. Gram Sabha, so far we know and the experience goes that it is not properly functioning in many of the places. Therefore, it has to be further strengthened, and Gram Sabha has to be made as a nucleus of the entire framework of this decentralized local government system. Now another thing we found that there is a local level of awareness to the tribal people or even the functionaries, that includes the elected representative and the officials. They are not aware about the very provisions of the act which I have already narrated to you. Now there should be some system or training program for all stakeholders to make them aware about the provisions of the act. Similarly, there is a need that there are certain tribal areas in the 5th schedule, they have certain best practices and they have already acted upon certain provisions of the act. That has to be captured and that has to be studied and that has to be circulated among all the areas, so that they can try to replicate in their area. So that is also very necessary for the so far the act is concerned. Now these are the things which I talked to you. The basic objective was to make you aware about the very provisions of the act, as also what are the gaps which are already available and what is to be done in future by the state government or even with the intervention of the central government to expedite these things, so that the very spirit of the of this act should go to the tribal people and they should get benefit out of it. So therefore, this lecture or discussion is very much restricted to the very provisions, as also the awakening and some of the suggestions and the measures given on the basis of the experiences gained so far about the tribal areas in the 5th schedule. Friends, those who are interested to know further about on this, because I have done a lot of study on this and 6 volumes are published on the extension of panchayats in the 5th schedule area, which I have already discussed. My email is sksindia49@gmail.com, and I am available to help you whatever you want, academic help whatever you want. Thank you very much.